maybe officially they don't say I'm addicted, but I would say that my name is Cullum and I'm addicted to pornography. That's part of who I am. Do I live in that every day nowadays? No. Is it part of my story? Yes. Am I ashamed of that? No. Do I regret a lot of it? Yeah. Do I stay in my regret? No. In the next half an hour, hopefully I can show you the steps of that and to go talk about the harm, the healing, and then the hope I found and maybe the hope that you have for yourselves, a loved one, and the next generation. So, quick little story about me is I'm Cullum Line, I coordinate youth ministry for the Diocese of Saskatoon. So it's a little awkward to give this talk, obviously. But I believe that there is power to naming things. Pornography is not Voldemort, it is not he who must not be named. This is something that needs to be named and is not being spoken of enough and in clear, blunt terms. So I apologize if some of this is a little shocking to you. You're like, oh, Cullum, that guy, he's addicted to pornography? Oh, that's awkward now. Well, I want you to realize that there's 10, 20, 30 other people in your life that you're probably going to have the same reaction to, right? So I'm happy to burst your bubble. I'm married to my wife about 9.5 years, Sharon. She's currently in Austin, Texas. I don't know if that was intentional not to be here when this talk is happening. We have 2 wonderful kids, Jacinta, who's 8 and change, and Ezra, who's 4, who's in the other room watching some Netflix show because, this would be awkward. And I'll have that conversation with them, but at the right time and in the right words. So, where does this start for me? I don't know. I was trying to think, where did it all start? And I honestly can't tell you exactly. That's good, maybe, and that's also really bad. Good in maybe the sense that I've been healed from a lot, that I no longer remember a lot of the details. Bad in the sense that maybe it was so easy that it wasn't like an obvious moment that I can remember. I can name you a couple of the early encounters that I had with it. Movies, maybe not explicitly pornography movies, but, oh, that woman doesn't have a shirt on. That's not normal to me. And she wasn't breastfeeding, Certain movies like that, friends sleep over. Hey, well, let's watch a movie that you definitely can watch with your parents, but they're upstairs, it's fine. Let's put this on. Right? Images I found in a magazine that my friend in the alley after school was like, hey, look what I found. Right? Part of my early story. I think where it went from curiosity to intentional clicking, for me, it was through the digital medium. And that was like the early digital medium, right? Now it's even easier. It started with a thing called Hotmail, right? This Outlook email. It was email. Email was my gateway to pornography. I was like, what's this spam folder? I don't know what was in there. Clicked on something popped up. I was like, holy shnikes, what is this? It closes. I clicked on one too many steps and then it opens up another pop-up. My screen is suddenly filled. I wasn't curious, I was more about how do I delete this as quickly as possible before my dad, who's in the other room, walks out and, smacks me into the next world, right? That was my first Irish Catholic response. So I got through that night. The next night, going through my email, doing work, there's a pop-up. Dad's not home. This looks interesting. What is this? There's a bunch of words here that I've heard friends say on the playground that I don't understand. Right? And so it went. We know where it goes from there. And that used to become my cover story for years. Kind of middle school, high school, that's when things got pretty intense. Would have been, I need to do homework. It was the computer that was in the loft, but usually it was pretty good that I was doing homework when mom and dad were making dinner or somewhere else, and I was better at the computer and the internet than them. They didn't know how to do anything, so I knew how to Alt-Tab to change the browser and change what's going on. Suddenly it looks like I'm researching World War I. Next thing you know, I'm researching something that's not. And that just became part of my routine. Part of my homework routine was viewing pornography. It was like part of the thing. We talked about, Mario talked about dopamine. Porn became the reward for getting my homework done, right? If I get my essay done quickly enough and mom and dad's gone to bed, right? And I can't stay up past midnight. He'll come out if he sees the light on in the hallway, right? After midnight. But before midnight, they're just watching the news hour with Jim Lehrer and they're just chilling in their room, right? So it's like I finished my homework and now I have 2 hours to watch pornography. And it was my release. Right? I got caught into animated like sex games, like SimCity type of things. And the curiosity that really got me there was you got to play out relationships. Here I'm this awkward virgin kid who didn't have any girlfriends or anything like that. I was like, well, I can practice and see how it works with these animated people, and then I can take those lessons, and that'll work in real life. No. But it still fed, right? That hunger for right relationships, but taken the wrong way, twisted. Addiction set in quickly. With that became masturbation, was normalized, and it just seemed part of life. It just seemed like that's what you do when you're 14, 16, 18, 20, etc. Right? Addiction was just who I was. I didn't know how to live a normal teenager life separate from it. I thought that was just part of what we went through. I love my parents. They didn't help with this area of life. And probably because they weren't giving a filter or language to have this conversation. So there was no conversation. My sexual education was porn. And with that came all of the twisted truths that come with that. I heard language from my friends in school, and I didn't want to be beat up and not seem cool, so I went home the next night and I Googled those words and watched videos to try to figure out what they were saying. And on it went. And then there was a new type, it suddenly didn't become enough. It had to get more twisted, had to get more perverted. And at some point, as Marin demonstrated, I knew it was messed up. But I couldn't deal with that tension. I needed that release. And so it would happen regardless. So silence really worsened it. The fact that I had no one to talk to, it was not being talked about in schools or in churches. I had nowhere to converse, even when I got to the point of understanding of like, this doesn't feel normal or right, but I have nothing to process that with. It became a barrier to me pursuing and creating these healthy dating relationships. Those apps didn't help, right? Because reality just became further removed. I became a slave. Even though I could Google whatever I wanted, watch whatever I wanted. You might say, wow, you were free. No. It was like my fingers were glued to that keyboard, and I couldn't stop them. It's the worst feeling of all time. I often had not many healthy female relationships because I didn't know how to relate to them. Because here I had seen women at their most vulnerable, abused, ignored, used as objects. So I had no filter of the opposite. So I knew I definitely didn't want to hurt them, but I didn't know how to relate to them. So there just was no relationships. It wrecked my self-confidence. My ability for self-discipline was non-existent. My self-worth and self-esteem was in the dumpster. As Marion kind of spoke that, you know what, At some point, I didn't feel I was worth to be free of it. I wasn't worthy of love or close relationships because of it. Or maybe I went there because I knew no one could ever love me. I know that to be wrong, but that is the truth that lived in my head. I had no control or hope in who I was, what I was capable of being, but I knew I wanted to be more. It was struggle to pursue goals and dreams of a better future because I couldn't see one escaped from this. So why even bother dreaming? So I struggled to finish projects. I struggled to follow passions or interests because I knew it was just going to be defeated or messed up because of this addiction. It would get in the way. So we talked about that, and Marian said a lot about science, right? It changes how you think, it changes how you view things. I don't have to go tons into that. Talked about it being the reward mechanism. I would think about my days of, it's only 6 hours till I get home and I can watch porn. It was my carrot to get through school, to deal with my parents, to deal with whatever. It was what I pursued, and then the end of my days were usually horribly depressing because I felt empty, unsatisfied. My faith in God, even though it was there and I grew up in a pretty faithful family, I think was stifled. I didn't believe in God's power because I had none in this battle. I didn't believe I could be healed and freed. I heard all these miracles and stories of other people, but He wasn't taking this away. So why would I trust Him? Why would I go to Him? I felt a slave to it, obviously, in later years, when I knew it was wrong and not good for me, right? We had talked about that. Is for probably the last 5, 6, 7 years of my true addiction, daily habit of pornography. I knew it was wrong, I knew good theology, I knew good practices, and still I fell. You can love Jesus and be addicted to pornography, right? You can be a contributing member to society and be addicted to pornography. Marian spoke of that well. All these kind of images we portray of someone who's addicted, right? I was fully functioning in every capacity of my life. Maybe besides some healthy relationships. But the rest of the world had no idea. And so as he spoke, I felt so alone and isolated. And even when I thought somebody knew me, I would never pursue that friendship going deeper because it was like, they don't know the real me. Even though in years later I realized that they did know the real me because they saw past my addiction or they saw me without it. But when I was in it, all I could say was, they're just seeing the outer shell, and this rotten core is staying unseen. And I feel horrible about myself. I feel shame to the nth degree, and it would lead me to a deeper level because I felt no one could see me. It created a great sense of powerlessness that often can come out sometimes sideways. In myself, I saw in others through my years of ministry that it can come out very aggressive. It can lead to abuse of many kinds and to other people. And I knew, and I can only chalk it up in my framework and my paradigm of faith in Christ, of grace, that somehow that didn't happen for me. That the addiction stayed in my silo. And I thank God to this day that the only lives destroyed were the ones that I viewed, right? And the ones involved in that. But how many more lives I could have destroyed. Pornography turns you inwards. I heard a quote from Christopher West, who does a lot on the theology of the body, a great teaching of the church on sexuality and humankind, and he says that the devil doesn't have clay. He can only twist and cover up. Sex was not seen as a gift in my life. It was an object, and in many ways, it was a curse to me. As I tried to get out of my addiction and learn about it, often, I even had a desire for the priesthood in a certain sense, so it could be simplified, right? To be like, well, I can't deal with women and that kind of stuff, so we'll just cut that part out of me, right? Which we all realize is foolishness and not healthy, and we've seen how that can get twisted up as well. But my desire was to be so free of it that I was willing to cut off a part of who I am. My ability to sense, my ability for physical pleasures. I was willing to give that all up to be free. I often found, and Marina talked about it, but in my story that even the years when I would go a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, free of it, and I would fall back. Usually it was days of frustration, when I was very angry at somebody, when I was lack of satisfaction, when there's problems in relationships with who I was dating or whatever was going on. That was my outlet. That's where I got my reward. That's where I could escape. But it always left me worse. And it stays with you. It changes your brain. There's images and there's videos and there's names that I can pull up without question. A few years ago, I went through kind of a prayer moment of trying to break a bond and a release. And a lot of these have been healed from my mind, I would say. But there's one woman that I'll always remember. Her name was Charlie. She was a video. And I don't know why Charlie sticks with me, but I can remember the website, I can remember what I searched to find Charlie, I can remember what happens in that video. And every time Charlie comes to my mind, I weep and I pray for her. It sticks to you. It was a struggle going and pursuing. When I started dating Sharon, my greatest fear in marriage was pornography wrecking my marriage. It was my ability that I wouldn't see Sharon on my wedding night, but I would see someone from a video. So we went to Tobit and we prayed that story. And I prayed for Charlie, I prayed for all these women, and I said, Lord, let me see my wife. The other greatest struggle was that I was afraid she would see me. It's been a great challenge in our marriage, and I can only share my story. She has a story too, of being able to be vulnerable to each other. It would be a lie to say our intimacy has not suffered because of pornography. I could go into great detail, but I'll skip it other than to say, it is hard for me to be fully present to the marital act. For years I struggled that at some point during it, right, something would click, and Sharon would be an object, not my beloved. And there'd be years where sometimes I'd be afraid, to have sex, because I didn't want to use her. Porn stole something from my marriage. And I have to fight it all the time. And that pains me. So even though technically I entered marriage as a virgin, I came with baggage. And why do I share this and why do I talk to young people and men about it is that I want them to be free to love the way that I think my God calls me to love. So, it gets better. There is healing, but there's scars. The theology of the body that I referenced was critical to my story. It's great teaching from John Paul II over the first few years of his pontificate on Wednesdays, where he talked about, really he went to Adam and Eve, the beginning of who we are as male and female. And it started to come to an understanding as I dove into some of these writings and heard speakers about it and talks of basically the real structure of love, the desire of a man and a woman, and how that can be beautiful. I started to realize that I was called to greatness, and that ache that I had, that hunger that I had, was not wrong, it was just misplaced. And I could start to scrape myself out of, pull myself out of that ditch. For me, my story, and I know most of us are, but maybe not everyone, but faith was a critical component to my journey. For me, being a Catholic, the sacraments were essential. I found the theology of God's mercy being never-ending, comforting, as I thought I would forever need it in this battle. So even though I was going to Mass, I was going to reconciliation, all these different things, I still didn't actually believe I'd be free of pornography. But I saw the beauty that even if I had this in me, right, that God still would love me. When for years I believed I was unlovable. And so I went and I went and I went. And the more I brought my struggle to my God, the better resolve and the better equipped I left to fight it. I didn't realize this was going on, right? It's not like suddenly I woke up one day in my 20s and was like, "Okay, Cullen, we got to get this under control. This is my 12-point plan." I just knew that I wanted to be whole. And I felt closer to that when I was living my faith. Reconciliation for me was critical for the grace that our faith teaches that I receive in it. And this leads to a thing that I think works for any human, was the psychology of what happens at reconciliation. Because I'm a stubborn Irishman, and I just frankly got sick and tired of saying the same bleeping stuff to my pastor. And at one point, a priest who I forever loved said, "Cullum, come back next week and say something different." It was one of the greatest gifts to me in my entire life. I think I did say the same thing next week. But it urged me to say that it's possible. It's possible. So the accountability I found in starting to share was essential. So even though that started in this confessional with a priest, I started to realize that, hey, being able to speak this gave me power in itself. And I didn't go on Facebook and just say, status update, Cullum is addicted to porn, post. That's not what I did. I don't necessarily recommend that. Could get awkward. But I did start to reach out to a few good men, that's the way it goes, right? Some close friends, and I was shocked to realize, oh, you struggle with pornography too? Awesome. Well, not awesome, but awesome in the sense that I knew I was not alone. And so there was a network of, I would say, kind of 4 to 6 guys that were just honest with each other where we were going. We were all in different stages of it, but it was all part of our story. And so we would just regularly have updates, sharing what's going on, usually done over beer and wings for us, but sometimes over prayer groups or just when we would see each other, dropping someone off after an event and just sitting in the car and saying, "Hey, how's it going?" And I started to see traction. I started to see I could go a week, I could go 2 weeks, I could go 3 weeks. I started to reclaim power. But I would fall, right? I mentioned these days of frustration when I was stressed. And so I started to learn some practical tools, which I'll share what worked for me. Can't guarantee success for you or your loved ones, but things that did bring me healing. I mentioned faith was a critical component for me. So a functional one for me was the Catholic guilt we talk about, especially in an Irish Catholic family that's quite strong. So I had a very functional thing. My entry to pornography was my laptop, plain and simple, right? So taking it out of my bedroom, taking it out of the bed, right? Working on it in a public place, like, that sounds like very simple, but was a very big shift. I also then put, this will be weird for some people, but that's what I need to do. I found the most gruesome crucified Christ image I could find, and I set it as my desktop. So I had to click through a picture of my Lord who died for me to watch pornography. And I was like, I won't do that. That'll be hard. I still did. I just felt really bad about it. But it did help me, sometimes at that barrier, but also as a reminder of what true love is. And to me, he became my image of what a man was. Because one of the biggest struggles for pornography in me was that it stripped me of my masculinity. So I stopped going on the computer after the rest of the house. If no one was home, I wouldn't be on the computer. If everybody was asleep, I'd have to be off the computer, right? Not staying up past like 11 or midnight or 1. As my mom says, nothing good happens after midnight. Mom was always right. I started to learn triggers, things that would lead me there, right? So to start to grow in self-awareness. How am I feeling? Am I super stressed? Have I prayed? What kind of media was I consuming? I would notice even certain music and certain movies affect how you think. And so I started to edit that out. Filtering became a huge thing. If you do not have Covenant Eyes installed at your house, go home and do it tonight. Literally go home and do it tonight. Okay, there's a few others, but Covenant Eyes is the best. CovenantEyes.com. Install browser filtering. You can do it on a router, you can do it on your computers or devices, you can put a browser. We just have to remove those barriers. Especially when I think of young people, it was email that got me. I wasn't looking for it. And so filtering helped with me for those times when I accidentally stumbled, when a pop-up came and it would just be a trigger and go, right? So I had to use things like that. I started talking about media as I would change the inputs in my life. Now, some Christian music is really cheesy and I don't love it, but there's a lot of good stuff out there too. And so for a couple of years I was hard into Christian music, Christian radio, Christian movies, all that type of stuff. Podcasts now, there's so many good things you can do. Cutting out a bunch of TV, unless it's Seventh Heaven, but then something else came out about that guy, so Hollywood, it's a mess now. But basically, I drastically edited what I was putting into my mind. I'd be listening to audiobooks, things that were leadership development, stuff about bettering yourself, productivity, things that started to spark my passions and interests, and I started to dream again, started to have goals, started to have hobbies, right, and passions, right, and to lean into those. Because God did create us, in my mind, to be passionate, right? But we have to find healthy avenues for them. Last but not least for myself, fasting. Now, I know some of us fast for health reasons now, intermittent fast and all that kind of stuff, but fasting was critical to me from a spiritual discipline, but also it helps grow the ability of self-denial, right? And it started to teach me that I had power. Right? I had the ability to say no. If I could say no to a coffee, if I could say no to a Timbit, I could say no to typing something into Google. So that was a big thing in my life. Finally, a big moment was when Sharon and I's relationship were growing is we just talked about it. I had to be honest. I told my parents about it. That was super awkward. It was super liberating at the same time. I fight every day now, but I'm not a slave. That pornography maybe in many ways stripped me of my masculinity, but now if a temptation comes and Google comes, and I might even type that sentence in there, and if I hit enter, I know what comes. And I've gotten to that point multiple times. And then sometimes I slam my laptop away and I say, not today. I've learned I love myself too much. I love women too much. I love my bride too much. I love my daughter too much. Hell no. And that is when I feel most like a man. Over time, the Lord has taken some of those names and images from my mind. I'm thankful for that. So there's a lot of hope. There's events like this where we can speak about it. This didn't happen 10 years ago. Matt Fradd, Jason Everett, Fight the New Drug, porneffect.com. There's so many resources and websites, right, that are there to help. There's science that backs us up in this struggle. Use them, find them, share them. Share your story. It empowers others, gives freedom to others. So for me, Christ is the conqueror. He has won. At some point in my life, I just had to invite him into this battle. I think every breath that I have is a moment to proclaim what is true, good, and beautiful. I think my story is beautiful. Might not be perfect, might not be shining, but God gave it to me. And I'll be damned if I waste that gift. So I end this to tell you that I don't know your story. I don't know where you are. I don't know if addiction is in your life or your loved one's life, someone around you. But you are not alone. You are loved beyond all reasoning. And you are more than your worst moment. With that, I'm going to go hug my kids. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Colin. Your story is indeed a beautiful one for sharing that.